Hello and good afternoon. This is Randy Wilt again, and I have my PhD in communications. As I've said in other presentations, I love to teach people how to prepare and deliver speeches. I love public speaking, I love presentations, and I know it's something that everybody has a fear to do, but hopefully from watching and listening to these different presentations, I could be of some help for you. So today we're going to be talking about how to deliver your speech. Now, there are several different types. Now, I've gone through some of these before, but we're going to very quickly go through these again. These are the different styles of speeches, your different delivery methods. There's the manuscript presentation, there's the memorized presentations, there's the extemporaneous presentation, and then there is the impromptu method. So let's go quickly through each one of these. The first one is what we call the manuscript. Now, in a manuscript, and we'll bring all these points up real quickly here. The manuscript is something that's very interesting because it is the actual written word that you are going to present word by word to your audience. Most of the time it's done by reading it. Now, when you do this, there's a couple things. First of all, you better consider your audience, because your audience is there to listen to you and for you to impart knowledge upon them, but also for them to gain knowledge and for them to connect with you. If you are reading a manuscript, and you've probably seen this before, where someone comes up there and they're just reading what they've written, they're not even looking at you, that's almost an insult to the audience. I mean, if the speaker is not even looking and talking to the audience is, they feel like, well, dang it, just give me your text, your manuscript, and let me take it home and read it. I don't have to waste my time sitting here for an hour listening to you talk. So therefore, when you are doing a manuscript, it's very important that you consider your audience. And what that means is that you cannot appear to be reading, and that you're using gestures and movements that is complementary to your manuscript in the way you're presenting. And mainly, you've got to have very, very, very good eye contact, which means that when you are reading your manuscript, that you're constantly looking up, and that you've got to be looking at your audience more than you're reading your manuscript. Now, I've seen some very effective manuscript presenters who they are reading their manuscript, but they know it so well from practice and practice and practice and practice that 2/3 of the time they're looking at their audience. So you really don't know they're reading their manuscript. Then I've also seen the other side too, where the person is looking down 90% of the time. You're wondering, why am I even sitting here just so he can read it to me? I can read it to myself for that matter. Now, like it says, you have to be really good at it. A lot of people think that's the easiest speech because you can hide behind the manuscript. No, you cannot. That's the fastest way to lose your audience. So you've got to be a really, really good speaker. And remember, when you're turning pages, every time you turn a page, you're telling the audience, I'm reading a manuscript, because they realize you turn a page. I always tell people, if you have to use a manuscript, and there are certain reasons why you have to use a manuscript, that what you should do is print it on legal size paper. That's 8.5 by 14, where letter size is 8.5 by 11. Then you want to not put it in 10-point type or 11-point type that you have to squint to see. Put it in like a 14 or 16-point type. Get your leading, that's your spacing between the lines. Get that pretty big, like a double space. And then only put it on the top half of the page. Now, why do you do that, you may say? There's a couple reasons. If you have a podium, you have a big surface there. Think about it. If your page is sitting there and you're reading, your chin is going down as you get to the bottom. You never want your chin to lower when you're speaking. You want your chin to stay on one level. That means only thing that actually can lower is your eyes. Well, how many of us can actually take our eyes all the way down to the bottom to our chest? We really cannot. So therefore, why do you want to put all of your text on your manuscript so low that you're having to lower your head? Once again, you're showing to the audience is that I'm reading. So if you keep it the top half of your paper, you keep it larger font, then you can scoot back some from the podium. And when you scoot back, you find all of a sudden the podium is getting on the same eyesight level as your first or second row. So therefore, as you're glancing down and you're reading this manuscript, it appears that you are looking at the first or second row. The people in the back just think you're looking down there. So when you look up, now you're going to be looking at your 5th, 6th, 8th, 9th, whatever row you're talking to. So that's very important to keep that in mind, is how you set up your manuscript. Now here's a sample here of an actual manuscript. Fellow citizens, until summoned by your state Republican committee to speak on, most of us can read our own writing, but for heaven's sakes, don't let someone write it for you. If someone's going to give you something to read, make sure they put it into word processing and they actually produce it in a nice font that you can read. The last thing you want to do is get there and stumble around because you can't read what is being said. Now, I did say that sometimes you have to have a manuscript. That's the only way to talk. It says down here it's necessary when you have to follow a script or you have a certain time allotment. I know many ministers, pastors, who they really needed a manuscript because they start, and after about 20 minutes, they've gotten to point 1 out of 5 points. You're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to be here for 2 hours. They needed a manuscript because they need to get those people to Sunday lunch. And so they needed to follow something instead of just rambling. The next thing is, not only is there like a time allotment, but also it helps you to make sure that you don't go any rabbit trails. I've told you before in possibly some of the other presentations is that a speech is taking the people down a path in a forest, and you've got to keep them on that path. And if you're going off on these 45-degree angles, these little rabbit trails, you're going to lose people in the forest. You got to keep them and bring them back. So sometimes if you find yourself that type of person who's going off on these little rabbit trails, then you particularly need a manuscript. And that means you really got to learn how to follow it to the point. Now, next thing we have is impromptu speaking. Impromptu speaking is basically when, and we're going to bring this up again, is when you have no notice that you're going to give a talk. And you may say, when does that happen? It happens all the time. I've been in many places where I have sat there at a conference and all of a sudden someone says, Dr. Wilt, would you introduce so-and-so for me? I'm like, oh my goodness, I've got to stand up. I had no preparation at all. I don't even know anything about the person, so I've got to very quickly get as much information as I can. Now, impromptu speaking, people say it's the most fearful thing in the world. Well, actually not. You know why? It's because you didn't know you're going to have to do it. Your fear is based upon because you're thinking about, oh my gosh, I got to speak, I got to speak, I got to speak. I have to have this preparation. I have these note cards. I got to get there and speak. Impromptu, they hit you right then and say, get up and talk about this real fast. And you're kind of like, oh, why did you decide to go to this? Why did you decide to travel to this city? Or why did you decide to go to that college? Or why did you decide to go shop at that store? All of a sudden, you're put on the spot. So the first thing you got to do is consider your audience. If you start talking to people, the first thing you do is you look around and think, who's my audience? What's their gender? What's their age? What's their income level? What's their academic level? All these things. What's their ethnicity? Are you talking to a bunch of senior citizens? Are you talking to a group of baby boomers or Gen X people? So look at your audience very quickly and figure out. So if you tell stories, and I always encourage people to have a couple of stump stories. Ronald Reagan was excellent about this. He always had a few stump stories that he could always throw in that have kind of humorous. I think the one that I remember probably the most is that when he gave any type of commencement speech, he always made a comment. He said, yes, he said, when I graduated from college, never thought I'd come back to college again, but by golly, here I come back, and and they're always surprised to see me come to college because they thought they got rid of me the first time. So little things like that, are always kind of good to bring up into an impromptu speech. And then next thing is be brief. Keep it to 2 or 3 minutes unless they tell you to go longer. Don't do a 10-second speech or 30-second speech, unless it's like supposed to be a very quick introduction. But nor don't get up there and ramble for 5 or 10 or 15 minutes. Because I guarantee you, impromptu speeches, you will ramble because you do not know what you're talking about before you got up there. Next thing is to organize your speech. make sure that you have it down to what you're going to say. Now you're going to sit there and say, how do you do that on impromptu? Well, you should always have a little piece of paper and maybe a pen with you. Ladies, you probably keep something in your purse. Guys, you probably have it in your pocket. If not, if someone tells you you need to speak, you need to get a pen real fast. Write it on the palm of your hand if you don't have a piece of paper. But get your thoughts down real quickly so you know point A, B, C, D. A is going to be your introduction. B is going to be you're going to talk about traveling to Germany. You're going to talk about the castles of Germany. You're talking about the food of Germany. You're talking about how much it costs an airfare to get to Germany. And your conclusion is, hey, you had a great time. So you write down those points real quickly so you can go down. Also, people say, wow, no preparation, but look, he sounded like he prepared a full speech for us. Draw on experiences and knowledge. The best thing you can always do in impromptu speaking is to tell personal stories. Give out personal quotes, things that are important to you. One of my favorite things when I get caught impromptu speaking, I always like to talk about my favorite Bible scripture. And that scripture is, it came to pass. Just like this speech, it is coming to pass. Just like this presentation I'm giving you, it will pass. You're not going to be stuck here forever. And it's a great way that I use to try to get people to understand is that okay, I'm going to get people to talk for a few minutes, but believe me, it's not going to be a long talk at all. Next thing, use gestures and movements. Impromptu speaking, move around some. Don't stand like a fixed board. Use your hands. Connect with your audience. Look at your audience. Move around with them. And then last thing here, go back to the very top one. Not only do you consider your audience, be sensitive to your audience. If you are boring your people to death, it's time to stop the speech. It's time to cut it off and close that speech if you're boring people. And hopefully I'm not boring you now with my talk. The next one is the extemporaneous speaking. Here's a picture of Clint Eastwood, and this was from the Republican convention where he's talking to the chair. Now, a lot of people say that was impromptu speech, and I think actually part of it was, but he did prepare it. So when you talk about a extemporaneous speaking, it means that you actually have a prepared speech. But it doesn't mean it's a manuscript that's written word by word. It means you have a speech that is based upon key words or key phrases. It could be on note cards, it could be on a sheet of paper. You can just have maybe a key sentence here. There's something just to remind you what you're talking about. Not that you're going to read it, but maybe if I'm talking about Germany, I'm going to talk about my air flight to Germany, maybe I'll just write down Lufthansa for the airline. And also I remember, oh yes, Lufthansa, they have great food. The flight attendants are wonderful. They're bilingual. They do such a wonderful job. They're always, the airline is always on time. So maybe that's all I need to write, just the word Lufthansa on there. So start with a preparation outline, which means that's where I'm actually going to write. Lufthansa has great food. Their flight attendants are wonderful. They're young Germans, men and women who are energetic, and they also have an airline that's always running. Okay, I'm writing all that in my outline, but I also know that I don't need to put that whole outline onto my note cards or my sheet. I just have to put a couple little key phrases. After you get your outline, rehearse with that outline. Rehearse with it, and then start dropping off things and or actually what I like to do is circle what's important. Lufthansa, yes, underline that. Food, circle that. Schedule, circle that. Flight attendants, young, energetic, circle that. Now what you've got is you've got some keywords, but don't memorize your speech word for word. A memorized speech is something completely different from speaking extemporaneous, which means a prepared speech. So if you try to memorize, let me tell you why I never memorize a speech. Now, some people really believe in it, but I don't. And the reason why is because I've tried it before. And when I get up in front of 300 people, and I see all these people staring at me, and all of a sudden I start forgetting what I memorized. But more so, you know what always happens? Something happens at the presentation. Also, my clicker doesn't work. The light bulb burns out on the projector. Maybe the slide screen is so far off to the side and I'm used to being behind me. So all these different things can actually be a distraction to you. If you're trying to remember what you memorized and you have these distractions, it could be a disaster for you because you start forgetting things. I will never forget the time that I took 12 years of piano to be a concert pianist. I'm the furthest thing in the world from being that. But I do remember one time going to a concert where I was one of the performers. I walked up there, I memorized the piece. I did not have any music or anything else. I got there, and by golly, I couldn't remember the first note. And I sat there and I henpecked trying to find the note on the piano, and finally I just had to give up on it. Now, if you do memorize a speech, and sometimes we have to, but if you do memorize, always have your speech with you. Because if you do forget something, like at that recital, that concert I was giving, if I had the original music with me, I could have looked at it and could have played it just perfectly great having it there. So if you do have to memorize a speech, make sure you take your paperwork, your manuscript, whatever with you. Next thing is adapt your delivery to your audience. If you have a audience that is active, walk around, present that way. If you have a very stoic type of audience, let's say you're doing like an annual report for a bunch of shareholders, that's where probably you're going to stay behind the podium very still. And the last thing it says, use natural gestures and movements. Nothing's worse than when you've got the movements that are not relatable to the way you are with your speech. One of the things I've seen happen so many times is that I've seen people who have been presenting and they have a tendency to be talking to the ceiling, looking up as they're talking, or they're looking down to the floor like they're contemplating. That's crazy, folks. The audience is wondering what you're doing. Why are you talking to the ceiling? What's up in that ceiling? You know what they're doing? They're looking at the ceiling too, trying to figure out who you're talking to. You're looking at it like it's a celestial being up there that you are talking to, like there's a whole group of angels or something. I don't know what people do when they talk up to the ceiling. In order to know what they're doing, they're talking to the floor. Why are you talking to the floor? Thank goodness you may have a mic on so your voice carries, but think about if you don't have a mic on, you're projecting down to a floor, hardwood or carpet. So therefore, the audience is trying to figure out, what are you doing looking down? Why can't you look at them? Eye contact is so very important. You have to always be looking and connecting with your audience. Now, how do I deliver verbal messages? Anytime you're doing a speech, and we've talked about the manuscript, the impromptu, a little bit about the memorization and the extemporaneous speech, you have to worry about your verbal message. So I'm going to bring up right now 3 things that you need to worry about. Using concrete words, using unbiased words, and using vivid words. Concrete words, we'll talk about that in a second. Unbiased words, you don't want to use anything that is going to offend people, anything that could be sexual, racial, cultural, religious-wise. I've had people who they will use the words, you know, it's a phrase that just amazes me when people use the word gay, because that goes across so many different generations. The younger generation does not use the word gay, but my parents, who were in their 80s and 90s, they grew up thinking gay meant to be happy, the gay 90s, the 1890s. So when someone was saying that, you know, well, this person over here is gay, they're thinking, oh, this person's very happy, you know, where someone else may think this person is being, you know, having a different sexual orientation or who knows what. So the point there is, don't use words, that's also concrete words, but don't use words that are biased. Don't use slang words. Don't use, and you got to be very careful. Is the person a Mexican, a Latino, a Hispanic, a Mexican American? What are they? Are you a white? Are you a Caucasian? Or are you a European American? Is a person black? Are they African? Are they African American? I mean, all these different things. Be very careful that you choose the correct words. And it also says use vivid words. Use words that bring color and excitement to your speech. We're going to talk about that too here in a moment. So let's first start talking about concrete words. You can see it says poodle versus dog, Lego versus toy. Don't sit there and say, yes, I've got this wonderful little dog. Don't say, I got this wonderful, you know, my dog is a Chow Husky mix. We call him a Chowski. So I get there and say, I've got this wonderful Chowski for a dog. Now, Chowski is a name I made up because he's a Chow Husky mix. I don't say dog, I say he's a Chowski. Okay? Now look at these unbiased words. Look at this: chairman versus chairperson, congressman versus member of Congress. Words that are unbiased but also get the meaning across. Vivid words. I like this one here: table versus a distressed oak table. Get those adjectives in there because that paints a picture for people. Don't just say, this is my youngest son, he's a cat. Cat's name is Max. He says, that scruffy old cat Max of mine. Kind of, cat Max? Max the cat? Max the scruffy old cat? Boy, did he just paint the great vivid picture for me. Now I know what Max looks like. Otherwise, I didn't know what Max was at all. Simple words, correct words. Those are very important. Avoid those long scientific words, foreign phrases, jargon. I love this phrase here, amalgamated. Do we really know what amalgamated? I heard, I've always talked about it because I love to hear ministers preach. I've been hearing them my whole life. I love going to church, but there's certain times I use words that just, in phrases that just drive me crazy. When they say, I beg your attention. What do you mean you beg my attention? Just say, I'd like to have your attention. You know, they'll use phrases that will expand out. And I've heard that in the corporate world too, where they use these, we have a conglomerate of things. We have a plethora of events coming up. Oh, don't say that. Just say we have got a lot of events coming up. There's always people who don't have very good vocabulary, and I'm one of them. I have a PhD, but I still don't have the vocabulary of many people. So when I hear people talk about things like they're going to have a succinct, cogent message, I had to think for a second. Okay, a cogent, succinct message with plethoras of events in it. It just makes it too confusing for me. It says correct words. Are we going to converse or are we going to conversate? Well, we're going to converse. So don't make up words. I find that quite common with scholars. Somewhere down the road, they got the idea that because they're a scholar with high degrees, that they can create words that are not in the dictionary. Okay, maybe you can, but the rest of us don't know what the words are. So make sure you use the correct words. What are some of the problems that you can have visually, those nonverbal problems that you can get into when you're speaking? Well, first of all, your physical appearance, your physical delivery, and also your eye contact. Physical appearance, what do you look like? You have to be careful on this. You have to dress up higher than the people in the audience. If your audience is business casual, don't go up there, I don't care how nice it looks, don't go up there wearing jeans and a sport coat. Wear the khaki pants. Wear the open collar shirt. Okay? Don't go up there in a t-shirt and a sport jacket. That doesn't match for business casual. Always outdressed. Now, at the same time, don't walk up there in the suit and tie either if it's a business casual. Now, let's also talk a little bit about just some of the things that can get people in trouble. Tattoos, body piercing. I know it defines who you are. I've taught students for years, and I know it's important to them, and I appreciate that. But think about your audience. If you're going to go and you're going to present, and I had a student one time who was going to present to faculty members, and he had sleeves. Now, sleeves, for those of you who don't know what it is tattoos all up and down the arms. Those are called sleeves. He had sleeves. Very, very nice, unique tattoos. I just loved looking at them. But then also, he was a graphic arts major. So you knew that he really put a lot of energy into having those tattoos look the way he wanted to. But the problem was, whenever he talked, he wore a short sleeve shirt. No one heard his talk. They're too busy looking at all of his tattoos. So I had to tell him, I said, well, next time you talk, wear a sport coat. And he said, but this is who I am. I said, well, I know that's who you are. And I'm sure everybody would like to know who you are. But the problem is that when you're up there, it's a distraction. Make sure your physical appearance is not a distraction. Same thing with body piercing. I've had students who've had all the piercings above their eyes, on the eyebrows, on their lips, and their nose. I'm kind of like, you know what? You're hard to look at. I know that's you, but you're hard to look at. Remove the piercing. Yeah, you can keep the ear piercing, that's normal. But remove the nose ring before you go up there and talk, because you've got to show credibility, you got to show logic and passion. And sometimes the body piercing is a distraction that pulls people from hearing your message instead of looking at you. And you want them to look at you, but you don't want them to sit there and look at you wondering why you have that. So that can be a problem. Same thing, just the way you dress and hairstyle. Make sure you don't experiment. And this has happened before, where I've had people in the business sector who decided they got a big presentation. I'll work with them. They have a big presentation, and then not before the presentation, they decide they're going to color their hair, decide they want to be a redhead instead of being a blonde, and all of a sudden they come in the next day and wow, what in the world happened to you? And everybody who they're presenting to remember them as a blonde, and now they're a redhead. So what do you think? Everybody's so busy looking at the redhead. Physical delivery, your gestures, your movement, your posture, stand up straight, don't slouch, don't lean over too much, don't put all of your weight on the podium, don't have what we call the white knuckle syndrome, where you've heard about the white knuckle flyer who's scared to fly. Don't be a white knuckle speaker where you're grasping the podium so tight that your knuckles are white. You're giving it away to your audience. Your audience may never know you're scared to speak until they saw the white knuckles. We move around. I've already talked about don't look up, don't look down, look at your audience. Make sure that you have a nice fluid moving, that you're not jerky on things. And last thing here is eye contact. I've already talked about that. Find 2 or 3 people in the audience and talk to those people. Make contact with everybody you can, but people who are not connecting with you, don't connect with them, but find some friendly faces. That's the best way to overcome stage fright. Voice, problems with the audible part of your speech. I would say probably 25 to 30% of the world have monotones. And monotones is tough to get over because it's just the way we talk. You have to work with it and work on it. And the way you do that is loudness. Get your voice louder and softer, and louder and softer, and that cuts your monotone. And then work on your pitch. Raise your voice up and then talk a little bit lower down about things. And make sure it works. Don't do a raised voice when you're doing a question, or a lowered voice when you're doing a question. Make sure that question comes across. Let me show you. So for example, if I'm going to say, where are we going to eat? Don't say, where are we going to eat? It doesn't make sense. Or where are we going to eat? That doesn't make sense either. Where are we going to eat? Do it through your pacing. Next thing, your vocal disfluency sounds. If you have a nasal sound, work on it. Project. Projection is the biggest thing you can do. And I always believe, like I said, loud, soft, in the volume. That's very important also. Now, some of those audio problems that we're dealing with, and we'll go through these fairly quickly here, is make sure your articulation and pronunciation is very, very good. I am the worst speaker about articulation and pronunciation. I didn't speak till I was probably like 3 or 4. I don't know what the deal was. And then I was behind. Now, I've always been behind on my speech, but I do enjoy public speaking. But I have to be very careful that I do not slur my words together, and that I learn to pronounce them just right. And the way you do that is be careful that you are pronouncing each syllable. So don't say, what's up? Or let's get and go. Let's get going. That's not let's go. You don't need to say let's get going. So make sure you're not slurring things in the pronunciation. Massachusetts? Oh my goodness, I hear that all the time. Boston, Massachusetts. Folks, there is no T after the M-A in Massachusetts. Think of a choo-choo train. It's Massachusetts. The T is at the end, not in the center, but invariably people put it in there. So watch your pronunciation. American? Yes, I know we're American, but we're Americans. Americans. So make sure your pronunciation is perfect. Now, how do you handle pronunciation so that it comes across correct? First thing is, you've got to make sure you're not deleting your final consonants, like land, there's a D, thirst, there's a T. So be very careful that you're not dropping things off. The British are tremendous about making sure every part of the word is in there, all those letters. But Americans, we have a tendency not to do that. So thank goodness we have a wonderful patriotic song that can help you. My country, 'tis to thee. Now let's read this, because I tell people before they give a speech, if they have problems with pronunciations and slurring, and I have to do this myself, I say this to myself quietly or silently, and I try to say it several times in my car while I'm going to speak. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside let freedom ring. You notice you're having to get all those D's and T's in there. And if you say this over and over, it causes you to slow down, and it causes you to get all those elements that makes pronunciation so valuable that people love to hear. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Now folks, let me tell you something, is that you remember when we were younger that you would go to maybe a stage show and you see the actor or actress down there, and their features are so nice until you got really close. You thought, oh my gosh, look at that makeup, how exaggerated it is. You have to do the same thing when you're speaking. You have to exaggerate unless you have a mic. If you have a mic, you don't have to exaggerate as much. But if you don't have a mic and you're trying to project sweet land of liberty, if you go sweet land of liberty, it's going to be one big blur. I'm sure you're probably detecting that from me anyhow when I'm talking here into this microphone, is that mics, even though they're great, they will also blur things for you too. So vocal deliveries, very quickly on this here, we're going to talk about 4 things here on vocal deliveries. First of all is volume. Volume is how soft or loud you are. Volume is so important. Some of us are soft speakers, some of us are loud speakers. So therefore, you've got to work to make sure that you're in the middle. But you've got to have both of them. If you're talking about something that's exciting, get your voice loud. But if you're talking about something very nice and that's very, very soft and quiet, then get your voice down. Pitch. Pitch is the inflection, the variation. That's you going up and going down. That's getting your treble and your bass going. That's important. And your rate, how fast you talk. Some people out there are speed speakers. Some people are tortoise speakers. They talk so slow you want to put the words in their mouth. Other people are like the hare. They're like the rabbit. They're the speed speakers. They talk so fast you can't even understand what they're saying because they're going through it so quickly. Matter of fact, once again, going back to some ministers I've heard, they talk so fast when they're reading their manuscript, you can't follow them. They're going so quick. The moment you hear something, you think about it, they've already gone to another thing, and they're 20 words into it, and you've lost all of it. So what do you do in your rate? You get a good pace going, but once again, your speed needs to speed up depending upon what you're talking about, or slow down. And the best way to do that is tell a story. Find a story sometime just to tell yourself and discover where you speed up, where you slow down. Typically where you're speeding up, you maybe get a little bit louder. Maybe your pitch is going up. Where you're slowing down, you're going to talk a little bit softer, and your pitch is going to go down to your bass. And of course, articulation is how you actually, like we've talked about, go in there and articulate each word. So how do you rehearse for your delivery? First of all, you want to practice verbalizing your presentation. You've got to practice it. Make every word come out of your mouth. Do not sit there and mumble your words. I tell students, I tell corporate leaders, open your mouth. Okay, maybe I say more to the students. I don't tell the corporate people as much. But I tell the students, your parents spent a fortune on those braces. Let's see your teeth. Your teeth are nice and straight. Why are you closing your mouth? Why are you mumbling? Open your mouth and pronounce your word. Next thing is practice using note cards. Your note cards or your sheet of paper has your main ideas. If this is an extemporaneous speech, you got those key words, those key phrases, you got your sources, you got your quotes, your stats, your story. practice with note cards. Next thing, practice in front of the mirror. Get comfortable, look at yourself, get a watch and time yourself, and then go for it. Make sure that you are speaking within the time frame that you're supposed to be speaking. But why do I say practice in front of the mirror? Because you will have to look at yourself in the mirror and you watch. When you practice the first few times in front of the mirror, you will be looking at yourself 10 or 20% of the time because you're spending off your time looking down at your notes. After you practice 4, 5, 6 times, I've had students before tell me that they haven't practiced at all. I say, I can tell. It's very obvious. I've had other students say, I went over this thing 20 times. I'm like, okay, you went over too many times because you seem to know it too well. Sometimes if you practice too much, you've got it down to such a pattern that it just almost sounds like a memorized speech. So there's a fine line into what is enough and what is too much. It says down here, practice in the shower, practice in your car, just practice. You have to practice your speech. If you don't practice it, you will certainly suffer from stage fright. If you don't have good notes, you will suffer from stage fright. I have another presentation on stage fright. Maybe you've heard it. If not, you may want to go hear it. But one of the things I say in there is that the biggest way to overcome stage fright is to have good notes to look at and to be totally prepared because you practice it. And the key here is practice, practice, practice if I don't say enough, and be sure and always time yourself when you're practicing. So questions. Why are you anxious about speaking? Why are you scared to be a public speaker? Why do you get nervous when you're going up there? I can tell you real quickly why. First of all, lack of experience. People who speak all the time, and I speak quite a bit, so I'm not that nervous. But when I stop speaking publicly for 2 or 3 months, I'm not being out there doing as much speaking, I start getting a little bit more nervous, a little bit more anxious about speaking. So the more you speak, the better you are. That's the way Toastmasters works, is that you're always going there speaking to get you comfortable with it. So lack of experience. Next thing is a bad past experience. Remember I told you about me and the piano concert? That was a terrible experience. I was so embarrassed. I got up, went back, and sunk down in my seat. And every time after that, for the whole next year, when my piano instructor told me, there's a concert, I said, no, I'm not going to do it. I will not do it. I had a bad experience. I'm not going to do it again. Okay, that happens to us in public speaking too. If we have a bad experience, we don't want to do it again. Well, how do you overcome that bad experience? Even if you had one, we're going to make sure it doesn't happen again. And the way that's going to happen is, number one, you're going to be prepared with good notes, note cards, sheets of paper, whatever it is. Number two, you're going to practice, 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 and you're going to be good at it. Number three, you're going to learn to connect with the audience by looking and finding some friendly faces out there, connect with those people, talk to those people, present to those people in those happy faces. You know why they're happy? They're happy because either they like you, they like your topic, or they're just so damn glad that you're up there speaking instead of they are. So they're going to connect with you. That's the way you're going to overcome those bad experiences. Worry over appearance false or being different from others. That is a huge thing. People all the time, they say, I'm scared I'm going to get there and embarrass myself. I'm worried because, I'm balding. And folks, if you can see me, I'm balding. I worry about what people think about me sometimes when I go up there, what I'm wearing. I may be concerned because I'm older. I get in front of a bunch of students. The students are in their 20s. I mean, God, Lord, some of these guys are just hunks. They're athletes. They're playing football, basketball. Okay, I'm getting up there here. I'm an old guy. Here I'm in my 50s. I'm balding. I'm gray. I'm wearing clothes that fits my era. And I think, boy, what do they think about me? They probably think I'm an old dude. No, not a dude. I'm just an old professor. So we have a problem with worrying about what we look like, what we act like. Don't do that. You are who you are. Be who you are. Be happy with that. Next thing, people get concerned about being the center of attention. The more you speak, the more you will be in the center, and the more comfortable you with that. And then, of course, last thing here is not being prepared for your presentation. We've already talked a lot about be prepared, practice, 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 practice. So which one are you going to be? Are you going to be that scared person there who is scared to death, who's going to get up there? Or are you going to be the guy on the right side here who gets up there and they just totally ace it? Well, that's the end of our presentation. I enjoy giving this all all this information to you. Hopefully it's helping you in some ways or the other. This has been a little bit longer than a lot of the presentations, but hopefully you got enough out of it that this will make you into a good speaker. And I always tell people at the end of my presentations that everybody is an accomplished speaker. We just don't know it. So once again, realize you're a good speaker and let it come out as you're up there talking. Have a good day now.